Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Welcome to all of our members, subscribers, and viewers from all across the world. And again, thank you so much for tuning in. Tonight, I wanted to talk to you about a lot of topics. The first one is the situation in Gaza with the Israeli genocide and the escalation against the hospitals, this time in Gaza, more escalation than before. The other thing that I wanted to talk to you about is the situation with Lebanon and the escalation and more statements coming from Israel that they will not be withdrawing. More attacks on the Lebanese-Syrian borders. Israel is saying that more weapons are going in through Syria, even with the fall of Bashar al-Assad, and they had many strikes on the Syrian-Lebanese borders again today, alongside several withdrawals from certain parts of Syria and what that could mean. I'm going to start off with Gaza. Now, in Gaza, all of you have been monitoring what's been happening in the past 15 months. Devastation after devastation and genocide against the civilian population. Israel punishes the civilian population for things they cannot accomplish against the Palestinian resistance. Israel is still suffering heavily in North Gaza, the area that they're targeting most in what is labeled as the general's plan in the north part of Gaza. And they even had missiles launched at them today from Gaza, from the northern part of Gaza, alongside many attacks every single day with all types of weapons from the Palestinian resistance, TBG, Yasin 105, direct attacks, side bombs targeting tanks, troop carriers, bulldozers, soldier gathering, sniping, gathering intel, publishing images of intelligence over the movements of the genocide soldiers inside of Gaza. But of course, Israel punishes the civilian population. Now, a big reason that Israel does that is to, of course, cover up the failure that they are facing from the Palestinian resistance, raise the defeated morale of the Israeli society, and portray an image of an illusional victory. That's why they do that in Gaza. That's why they do what they do all across the region. And Benjamin Netanyahu goes about with his arrogant psychopathy, saying that, look what we're doing, this is new, I told you. And then saying that we're accomplishing all of these things, despite the fact that he's not accomplishing the first thing that he mentioned when it comes to the war. That's the first and most important part. Well, eliminating the Hamas. He's not going to be eliminating the Hamas, and they're still defeating him and his depraved army in Gaza. And he hasn't achieved any of his objectives in Gaza, nor in Lebanon, by the way. So all of that is to portray an image, because the biggest victory that Israel can achieve is the victory over the public opinion, over the minds of the people, that they are actually achieving what they want to, when really and truly on the ground, they are not. And we're having more and more statements and reports coming from Israel that I'm going to be sharing with you now, that indicate the level of problems and disaster Israel is in. But I'm going to start off with Gaza, and I'm going to share this with you, and this speaks volumes, really, more than anyone can imagine. This is this image, and I'm going to post the video. Hopefully, YouTube will be generous enough to keep it. There's nothing too explicit here. These are the medical staff of Kamal Udwan Hospital, doctors and nurses. Israel destroyed the hospital after imposing a blockade on it alongside multiple other hospitals, bombarding it, killing people, preventing them from getting their medical equipment, from getting any medicine, from getting any food, any fuel, any water, everything. And this is how it ended. After these staff, these heroic staff, really, they persisted and remained there. And this is what they've done to them. Have a look at this. If you bear with me a second, I'm just gonna post the actual video. Here we go. Again, these are hospital staff. Unknown location, all of them have been arrested, including the director of the hospital, Dr. Hussam Abu Safiya. And there were dozens of patients there, patients with critical wounds. And they forced them to evacuate. No ambulances, no one driving them, no nothing. No one knows what really happened to them. So this is what Israel is doing inside of Gaza, destroying hospitals, doing this to medical staff, despite constant calls from day one, and despite the fact that Israel already carried out massacres from the beginning. If you remember, against the Al-Ma'madan hospital, where they brutally killed 600 people inside those patients, healthcare staff, doctors, and refugees seeking shelter in the hospital, thinking that this state would have some sort of limits when it comes to targeting civilian infrastructure, but clearly they don't. And they prove time after time the levels of their psychopathy, sickness, sadism, and depravity to the whole world. And they are able to do that because of the lack of proper action being taken against them. You're talking about an entity that has been built upon destruction, racism, supremacy, terror, ethnic cleansing, and genocide. And they are trying to repeat that again in Gaza. So that's the situation. They're escalating alongside the talks of ceasefire talks and developments and what have you. And again, nothing has developed much apart from the stages that we spoke about previously, which is Israel still insisting on releasing more prisoners of war in the first phase, and trying to delay any declaration about ending the war. This shows the true intentions of Israel when it comes to Gaza. Now, there are more developments. There are more developments when it comes to Gaza itself. Firstly, more and more Israelis are refusing to serve. And guess what? The rate of refusal now, it was reported to be 25% just over a few weeks ago. Now, there has been a report in Israel that many reserve units in the Israeli army confirmed that the rate of compliance with conscription orders has decreased to 60%. Now, they're not saying outright refusal, but compliance with conscription orders. So, they could have many things really, but primarily we're talking about refusal. They're not saying outright refusal, but this is refusal at the end of the day. People not complying, 60%. That's over half of the reservist force inside of Israel refusing to serve. Add that to the tens of thousands of killed and wounded, over 100,000 suffering from PTSD. What does Israel have remaining? And that's why they're on a massive campaign on this illusional victory, an illusional victory they're trying to please their own public with. Also, Haaretz published something interesting. It said the army is conducting a systematic destruction operation in Gaza. Citing an intelligence officer in the Southern Command, he said the IDF operation in northern Gaza Strip is faltering. The percentage of Hamas regaining its military arm is high. Israeli army officers are conducting a systematic destruction operation in Gaza to obstruct or prevent Palestinians from returning to destroyed cities. The continuation of the war in Gaza is leading to a manpower crisis in the Israeli army, and hundreds of officers have recently completed their service. Many reserve units in the Israeli army confirmed that the rate of compliance with conscription orders has decreased to 60%. That was in Haaretz. World Health Organization is saying what is happening in to Gaza hospitals is horrific. Everyone knows it's horrific. And of course, more health organizations and the World Food Program is saying the hunger is spreading throughout Gaza. Now, it's not only the pressure coming from the current prisoners of war as well inside of Israel. In Gaza, there has been a prisoner called Shaul, Oron Shaul. This man has been kidnapped by the Palestinian resistance and taken as a prisoner of war in 2014. Israel declared him dead. They implemented the Hannibal Directive on him, by the way. At the time, they targeted him when they knew he was being kidnapped. And now the Palestinian resistance are potentially going to release more proof that they kidnapped more Israeli soldiers inside of Gaza, by the way. They just gave a hint in one of their recent videos that, you know, more to come. We kill some and we imprison some. Now the family of this man are saying you can't also leave him too. You know, 10 years, they've had 4 prisoners inside of Gaza, Israel, and they neglected them. And now they've seen how much their country cares about them with the recent war, and how much they neglect them as well, sending more people to be killed inside of Gaza without any response, killing them. Okay, Israel killed more than half of them. So that's the first part with Gaza. This is the first part with Gaza. The second part that I wanted to talk to you about is we've had reports of Israel withdrawing from parts of Syria. Israel has been expanding in Syria. And now there's a report from Al-Watan, which is a main network in Syria, saying the Israeli army withdrew from the towns that entered the Dar'a countryside. Source told the Syrian Ministry of Interior, the Syrian newspaper Al-Watan, that the Israeli army withdrew from the towns in the Dar'a countryside. But they added, a source in the Syrian Interior Ministry told Al Jazeera that the Israeli army withdrew from Jamla, Ash-Shajara, Beit Qara, Koya, Ma'ariya, and Saida in the Dar'a countryside. These were the specific ones. So, it doesn't mean that Israel is like on a massive expansionist thing with certain retreats, but this retreat could be potentially temporary in Syria because they're not really facing anything when it comes to like anyone forcing them to go out or any fighting or anything from the new government in Syria. But they're retreating. This could indicate that they have some sort of diplomatic talk happening between them and the new Syrian interim government, potentially with Turkish involvement. Also, they might be redeploying some of these troops to Lebanon. There have been multiple reports now that Israel is saying, no one said we're going to withdraw after 60 days. Even the Lebanese caretaker prime minister, Najib Mikati, he's saying that, no, I'm denying that I was told Israel is not going to leave, right? Mikati denies Lebanon told that Israel won't withdraw after the 60-day period. Totally baseless, he's saying. These reports are totally baseless that, you know, we were told that Israel is not going to withdraw, but more and more talk is coming from Israel that, oh no, we didn't say you were going to withdraw. Potentially relying on a certain phrase in the side agreement that they had with the United States, similar to what they're trying to do with the Palestinian resistance, who's potentially is a bit more strict when it comes to the details and all of the wording of the ceasefire documents. And the Palestinian resistance also, they are making sure when it comes to the ceasefire talks that the terminology used in the documents, both in Arabic, Hebrew, and in English, is the same, because Israel would potentially be trying to play with the wording in different languages to interpret it in a different manner. This is where Hezbollah, they relied probably a bit too much on the main agreement that they had with France, the United States, their country, and Israel. But now they are facing more attacks, and Israel saying they won't withdraw from Lebanon. There were even some settler movements present in the southern part of Lebanon. In the past few weeks, Israel is showing off some arms that they had from Hezbollah in the south. Where is that taking us? Because it wasn't just this that was reported. Israel is now saying again that they targeted another Hezbollah arms shipment coming from Syria. We had this report in the Times of Israel, and a couple of days ago I spoke about the delivery that Israel attacked. Even in the beginning of the change in Syria, I told people that this would continue. Many people found it like ridiculous almost. But what is Israel attacking? They're confirming that they're attacking weapons coming from Syria to Lebanon. Who is in power in Syria? The HTS is in power. How are these weapons going through? Either they could be knowing, or Hezbollah still had roots that were really unknown to the Assad government, right? So it was this report in the Times of Israel, published today, saying IDF says it hit Hezbollah infrastructure used to transfer arms in strikes on Syria-Lebanon border. Janta crossing again, right? Now they're saying Hezbollah is using civilian infrastructure to carry out these activities and transfer weapons. And in the previous report, they said that, well, they carried out these transfers in recent days. In a previous video that I spoke with you about a couple of days ago. Again, that's indicating that there are still weapons going in from Syria to Lebanon, clearly. And Israel is still, casting doubt and delegitimizing the new Syrian government. Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar today, he said the Syrian government now, he called them a terrorist gang from Idlib that occupied Damascus. The world is talking about an orderly change of government, but that's a government that wasn't democratically elected and does not control all of Syria. That's according to Israel. They are still using this terminology when it comes to Syria, although other countries, even like Russia, we had statements from Lavrov. He said that Shara said that Russian relationship with Syria is long-standing and strategic, and we share this view with our Syrian friends. Russia, one of the closest allies to the previous President Bashar al-Assad, who stepped in to help him, is saying that we share this. No, Syria is a strategic partner, a long-standing strategic partner to Syria. That's something significant coming from Russia. Now, from an Israeli perspective, when it comes to Lebanon, because the breaches are recorded by the Israeli breaches in Lebanon. They're recorded by Hezbollah, the UN, and the Lebanese army. And so far, they've recorded approximately over 80 breaches. But Israel is saying, and it's important to know what they're claiming, Israel is saying, no, Hezbollah had 120 breaches. It's Hezbollah who's breaching the agreement. They're sending armed people back to the south, and they're probably considering all of this weapons transfers from Syria. They're considering that a breach. Therefore, they are legitimizing these aggressions against Lebanon, and now they're saying, no, we don't, we're not going to withdraw. And they're criticizing the weapons smuggling from Syria even more. Tomer Bar, the head of the Israeli Air Force, said today we attacked 7 crossings from Syria to Lebanon. They're trying to test us. He's saying Hezbollah is trying to test us and get weapons in. They try to raise their heads and check how far our enforcement goes. We cannot accept this. That's a direct confirmation from Israel that Hezbollah are getting the arms in. Okay. With all of that, what's going to happen? So Israel is not stopping in Gaza. They're having this expansion in Syria that they're withdrawing slightly from now, with this confirmed report that they withdrew from multiple parts in the Dir'a countryside. They're increasing their attacks in Yemen. And before I forget, in Yemen, they again attacked Ben Gurion Airport. They attacked Ben Gurion Airport today, and they sent a UAV to Asqalan or Ashkelon. And Yahya Sari is saying we have the capacity to expand our bank of targets, again indicating we might see another escalation or a phase 6 coming from Ansarullah. And he's saying we won't stop supporting Gaza. So are the Yemenis treating this differently than potentially other fronts, in particular Iran and Lebanon? I think what people need to understand is, first and foremost, each front has its own specific situation, whether when it comes to the politics, when it comes to society, when it comes to their geographic location, when it comes to their priorities, weak points, strong points, and they have their internal things as well. Like we saw this massive change happening in Syria. There are certain things to be considered inside of Lebanon as well. Hezbollah for a very long time didn't want to drag Lebanon into an all-out war. They succeeded for about a year up until Israel decided to go on an all-out war. And Hezbollah considered the rest of the civilian population and the political echelon as well in Lebanon, because not everyone was for going and supporting Gaza. You see, many countries have a more self-centered approach. And the irony is they wouldn't really have the self-centered approach if it was their country attacked. They would be asking, where are the other countries of the world? And we all know by now that Israel is able to get away with all of this because of the lack of action, the inaction coming from the primarily Arab states surrounding Israel. However, we have participants, and these participants are well known. In the past 15 months, the participants are well known. Of course, the Palestinian resistance, the Lebanese resistance, the Yemeni Ansarullah, the Iraqi resistance, and Iran. It's absolutely correct to also say that, well, if something is agreed upon with Iran, things might change. Things might change. However, based on what we're seeing now, even any sort of understandings with Iran, similar to understanding that the US had with them back in January 2024, when more and more US bases inside of Iraq started to be attacked, when then the Iraqi resistance decided or declared we're no longer attacking American bases inside of Iraq, we're only targeting Israel. That was due to an understanding they had with Iran. Iran definitely has leverage over the sides it supports, but each of them have their own specific and independent approach. And when they decide to participate, they participate on their own accord. That's why we had participation in different timings. For example, the first side that participated was Hezbollah after the Palestinian resistance started Al-Aqsa flood on the 7th of October. It was Hezbollah who participated on the 8th of October as a supporting front, not as a side, a participant in the war. And of course, the situation led to having an all-scale, full-out war afterwards. But in the beginning, Hezbollah were only targeting certain posts and, radar systems. They were important, but they weren't like on an all-out attack. Some of their light missiles were used, but even with that, in the first month, they exhausted 30 to 40% of the army's resources. And to them, that was an achievement, because Israel could have deployed all of these forces inside of Gaza. And from the perspective of Hezbollah, well, we lifted some of that pressure up without dragging Lebanon to an all-out war. And similarly, the calculations differ in Iraq, the calculations differ in Yemen and Iran as well. From an Iranian perspective, they would be thinking about their defense capabilities, how much vulnerability they have, their weak points, and how they would use their strategic weapons, and to what extent, and will it be in line with international law, or will it not be in line with international law, like what their enemies do. With Yemen, it's a separate story too. However, from what's happening now and from the behavior that's coming from Israel, well, they're not planning to stop anything. They are planning to continue. The United States is backing them and buying them more and more time with this talk of a ceasefire. The lack of proper action coming from the countries surrounding them, efficient to the level of stopping the war, clearly is not enough. They've had an impact. The participants of the resistance front, they did have an impact, but Israel is still ongoing. Still ongoing with what, though? Still ongoing with internal damage. 60% refusal from the reservists, according to Haaretz. People now going to the actual soldiers, telling them not to serve. The word refusing in Israel was like a taboo. Nothing is a taboo anymore in Israel. No one has any faith in the political system, in the military system. The society is divided, and we're on our way to a violent, bloody civil war inside of Israel. And all of Israel's moves is to deflect from that. Israel is our artists in deflection. They always deflect. Deny, deflect, blame your enemy with that of what you do. This is what they always do. However, now it's reaching a point where, well, the countries that have been supporting Gaza will have to make a decision. Are they going to take the same approach that they have taken before, with the levels of attacks, with limited attacks, with only targeting certain areas inside of Israel, with potentially giving time to a deal? Or will we see at some point an all-out coordinated attack on Israel? This is the attack that Israel is most petrified from. An attack where Hezbollah, Ansarullah, the Iraqi resistance, and Iran would be attacking them. 10 to 20,000 missiles all at once. Because clearly they're still supported by the United States. Nothing is stopping them. If each front would want to continue only in a single manner, like based on their situation, attacking Israel, that's potentially going to buy Israel more time. Now, when would that situation change? When might we see a change in the way the resistance fronts are actually attacking Israel? And understand if we're going to see like slight escalations that are very calculated, and will we see something coming all out? I think we're getting closer and closer to that point. Why? Because if Iran, who's behind all of this support for the resistance, everyone knows that Iran is the main backer of the resistance movements inside of Israel, and I don't think anyone should deny that based on either ideology or political affiliation, or even if they have criticism on the Iranian role inside of Syria, for example. Iran is undeniably the country with the most support for the resistance. They have given the situation time. They've given time, and there was a ceasefire with Lebanon. There are more talks about a ceasefire in Gaza, but fact of the matter is we're not seeing a genuine will or approach coming from Israel to respect any of that. Even though there's an argument that Netanyahu already secured the following days with potentially temporary coalition, or with potentially his current allies coming from the far right remaining in his government, because they already accepted a ceasefire in Lebanon. However, judging by the ceasefire in Lebanon, clearly Netanyahu is not ending anything, and that's why they're still with him. That's the other argument that comes here. But in my opinion, I think all of that will be clarified further up until the 27th or towards the end of January. This is where the 60-day period of the ceasefire or the temporary ceasefire agreement with Lebanon will end. Is Israel creating all of this tension now, and creating these tensions, acting like we want to target everyone, targeting the borders, targeting further into Lebanon, killing even people in Lebanon during the ceasefire by using the side agreement they had with the US and trusting that the United States will continue to support them? The US administration, of course, not the people. If you're from the US, don't worry, I know. Perhaps Hezbollah will wait up until the last second and then decide to open an all-out front on Israel again. How will they do it? Will they start from the first beginning, from the first phase, starting to attack only limited locations, or will they restart from the point they finished at? These are two very important things. If Hezbollah starts from the point at which they finished, which is 400 to 500 missiles on central Israel and the central northern part of Israel, that's going to be something that would disable Israel, because Israel had no answer to Hezbollah. Hezbollah, clearly their effectiveness and capability hasn't been affected, whether by the Israeli aggression or by the change in Syria, with all of these attacks on weapons shipments coming from Syria to Lebanon. And they have the capacity to continue in attacking Israel. But they did not want to target certain things inside of Israel where both them and the Israelis knew we're talking about mutual destruction, which are the strategic locations inside of Lebanon, strategic infrastructure, for example, power stations, the airport, and the energy sector. Both Hezbollah and Israel know if one side attacks those facilities or destroy them, the other side will destroy them too. And Hezbollah, although they had significant attacks, painful blows they gave to Israel. Israel had painful blows when it comes to their command, of course, but it wasn't effective to stop them. So the question is, will Hezbollah start from the moment they finished, and will the resistance fronts, including Iran, decide to go on this united attack against Israel? There's a very big prospect that could happen. And I'll tell you why. The first reason is we've been here for 14 months talking about this, and we've witnessed a psychopathic, genocidal, terrorist entity that crossed all lines possible and sunk into the lowest lows of barbarism when it comes to Gaza and when it comes to the people of the region, supported by the US administration and other countries as well. These participants in this war who decided to go and show support to those people in Gaza facing a genocide on their own accord, no one forced them to, but simply on the request of the Palestinian resistance, they saw a side that cannot be dealt with. They also saw a side that is constantly escalating. However, they also saw a side, and I'm talking about Israel in the form of Israel, that has constantly become weaker on the military level, become weaker on the political level, become more neglected internationally. It's viewed as a pariah state. No one sympathizes with them. And as a matter of fact, most people are surprised by, why are you being lightweights with them? Why are you treating them so nicely? So the prospect of that happening is high. Yemen are saying that, well, Ansarullah in Yemen, or the more known as the Houthis, they're saying, well, escalation might come, a prospect of a sixth phase escalation. Iran were pending a true promise to response. And Hezbollah, well, we saw how they finished. They finished with hundreds of missiles on central Israel. Even without that, Israel, it's getting destroyed from within. But add the hundreds of missiles on a daily basis from Lebanon without any effective answer from Israel, that's a catastrophe. And Israel already admits that they don't have an answer to Yemen. It's a tough nut to crack. We don't have something strategic to a level where we can stop these attacks against us. The US forces in the Red Sea, well, Ansarullah already expelled 3 aircraft carriers. That's something significant. That's something that these aircraft carriers were there to terrorize the people of the nation. Don't even say a word against the US, otherwise we have an aircraft carrier next to us. Yemen told them, you're not intimidating anyone. And these haven't been touched by Iran, by the way. Now imagine if Ansarullah had this, what would Iran do? And even when it comes to Hezbollah, the late Secretary General of Hezbollah, Said Hassan Nasrallah, he said at the time, we will cover the whole Mediterranean if needs be. And we're not like Ansarullah, indicating that Hezbollah even have more force than Ansarullah than in the sea when it comes to, land to sea missiles. All of that is significant. Now, some people might say, well, why haven't they done that? Of course, and no one is really in a position to say, why do these countries don't go on an all-out war? It's not you and me or whatever. It's them. They have their, needs. They know their strengths. They know their weaknesses, and they have their own strategy. You can say it might be wrong or might be right, but, no one really knows. But one thing is that people are saying, why did you give Israel time to do that? Everyone who participated against them. Why did you give Israel time to have ceasefire talks when clearly they haven't had ceasefire talks? And you give them time to rearm and regroup, and the answer to that is very simple. Any break gives the other side a break. That's number one. So if Israel took a break to rearm itself or try and, get whatever it wants, the other side did. And guess what? Israel is failing at recovery. Why? Because they're having more people refusing to serve. And what does Israel need most? Everyone established by now they cannot end everything and achieve their military war objectives only by the Air Force. Everyone knows that by now. What do they need? They need ground forces. Are they able to get people to fight for them on the ground? 60%, according to Haaretz, are refusing to go and serve now. Of course not. Did the other side manage to recover and get more people to? Of course. Same report in Haaretz said Hamas are regaining their capability in terms of manpower at a very high level. Previous reports said Hamas already recruited the same numbers they lost during the genocide. That is Hamas in Gaza facing a genocide. Now imagine what it's like in Lebanon, imagine what it's like in Yemen, and imagine what it's like in Iran. So who's benefiting from these periods more? Israel or the other groups? And are they doing this as a tactic also to prepare for something potentially longer? All of these are assumptions and questions. Because at the end of the day, even if we get to a ceasefire tomorrow, by the way, that doesn't mean the battle will end and that's it. No, there's going to be something up until apartheid Israel ceases to exist, up until that regime and what controls that regime is totally changed. Because Zionism is not compatible with humanity. Political Zionism is political terrorism, is genocide, is ethnic cleansing and supremacy. Fascism doesn't work. Proven recipe of failure. Zionism is fascism. It's supremacy. It's incompatible with humanity, with the 21st century. It's not something that should exist, really. It should be delegitimized. So something should be made illegal. And the more time goes by, even if you have a ceasefire, well, you will reach a point of further escalation or a change in the global scene. Because how is Israel surviving so far? Israel's only surviving by the United States administration support. Only. If the United States administration lifted the support of Israel, Israel will die. Simple. Stop arming them. Stop supporting them. Stop restocking their weapons piles. That's it, done. There's no one else to cover what America sends to Israel. No one. No other country. No other ally. No one's going to do that. So even if there is a ceasefire, it will continue up until Zionism is done, right? But for now, Netanyahu is still pushing it. And what Netanyahu has been doing, and that's in line to what he's doing now, is again pushing all of the self-destruction buttons on Israel. Israel, outside all of those involved, needed the ceasefire. And they needed to stop for a very long time. They didn't just need a temporary ceasefire. They needed to end the war for their own good, for their own sake. Israel has done everything that they shouldn't do. Constantly remain in an open state of war, gather more criticism and scrutiny, relying on media censorship, not realizing the level of impact that alternative media has, destroying society from within, using ground forces when they don't have enough capacity or well-trained ground forces to combat, really sending people to die as cannon fodder, and prolonging it as much as possible. All of that is against the whole philosophy of Israel of fast, effective wars in the enemy territory. They have done the opposite, and they have done the opposite without being prepared for it. It's not like they had a strategy and they thought, yeah, we're changing the way we're fighting now, and we're no longer interested in just airstrikes. No, we're going to send ground forces to... No, they send these people to die anyway. And think about it for 1 second. Many of the people Israel sent to go and fight in the Gaza genocide are complete amateurs and without experience. Those who are experienced and who are trained in small-scale urban warfare training. Something that resembles Gaza or some of the refugee camps inside of Gaza. Did Israel send them to urban warfare? Israel didn't send them to urban warfare. Israel sent them to disaster warfare, to an urbanicide warfare, destroyed buildings. No one in Israel is trained on how to fight in destroyed buildings. And if anyone has an ounce of brain inside of Israel, they would file a massive lawsuit, the whole people against their own government, for sending their people to die without even training them properly. All of that is indicating that, well, despite the talks and despite certain moves and despite some ceasefire calls, no, Israel is continuing. continuing first and foremost for the sake of one man, Benjamin Netanyahu. Will he be able to continue, and will the resistance fronts start an all-out attack that will force him to end? That's the big question. And that's what we would be interested to see in the next coming weeks. And again, thank you so much, everyone. That was it. I'll open the space up for all of your comments or questions. And thank you again for tuning in for another live stream. And if you have any questions, of course, if you wouldn't mind just highlighting them so I don't miss them, we'll get to as much as possible. Of course, apologies in advance. I won't get all of the comments, but we'll do our best. Before I continue, Alan Marwin, Wasim Ghorani, and Trill Iman and Amin Danya, thank you so much for your supers. Alan Marwin says, hello again, Mahmoud. The information you provide is vital to our attempts to understand the depravity of Israel. Thank you so much, my friend. Wasim Ghorani, would it be easier for the resistance to target Baku oil pump by cutting off 40% of War Machine? Listen, that could be effective, but then again, Israel clearly still has back routes. They don't forget what Ansarullah have done in the Mediterranean, right, wasn't as effective as what they've done in the Red Sea. So Israel would potentially still have something, but anything to stop Israel would be effective, whether it's oil, whether it's the economy. But the biggest thing really is the arms coming from the United States. And Trill Iman is saying, Maher Marwan, HTS governor, officially said he is open to having a peaceful ties with Israel and normalized ties. I heard that, and that's very alarming and worrying. Now, when it comes to foreign policy statements, usually the official statements would come either from the foreign minister or from the leader of the country. They haven't said that they're willing to have a peaceful tie with Israel. But the fact that even some people are even contemplating that in Syria is totally ridiculous, in my opinion. And Amin Dani saying, like Gaza, they intend to legitimize enforcement after occupying any territory in Lebanon, now Syria. Like Turkey and Syria, Israel gives themselves the liberty to people's property. The reality of the jungle is lawless. Israel, we know them by now. I mean, everyone who doesn't know them, really, what have we been seeing? And the way things are run at the moment is force. The world is not run by international law. And that, believe it or not, is a very big problem. The thing is, are the opposing sides to Israel understanding that, they're not dealing with anyone who respects international law? Or are they trying to do something else, by respecting or having some sort of regard to this international law that was put in its place by the main powers, really, who implement it on the weaker countries and let their own countries get away with it. Yoav Gallant, a wanted war criminal, visited the United States. How is that acceptable? And Tariq Mujahid, thank you so much for that as well. Stephen Kelly, are the American warships fleeing? Well, they retreated. So 2 of them fled before, Eisenhower and Lincoln. Harry S. Truman retreated. The least you can say is retreated. And the previous ones were attacked. The United States said that there was maintenance work. And to be fair, they do require a lot of maintenance, the aircraft carriers, and that maintenance could last for a year. But for the first time, I believe in many years, the US didn't have an aircraft carrier in the South China Sea. That's how desperate they were to Save the genostate. But yes, Ansarullah's attacks in Yemen, they forced them to retreat alongside several destroyers as well. Now, what do you think will be the impact, as from Abdullah Ali, on Israel from Iran's future response? True Promise 3. I think the biggest thing that shocked Israel, well, the biggest thing that shocked them was the 7th of October. But the biggest attack following the 7th of October was the attack from Iran. They need to understand the scale of what Iran is capable of is, it's not like other movements. 200 hypersonic missiles landing, that was something else. And you could see that by the faces of Netanyahu, by the faces of Hagari at the time. These people were shaking in fear. Now imagine that multiplied by 2, 3, 4, 5. And someone else saying, James is saying, I want to know, can Iran fire 1,000 missiles at once? They can fire thousands of missiles at once. Hamas in Gaza fired 5,000 missiles and mortars in 25 minutes on October the 7th. So Iran, of course, they would be able to. And A&A team, thank you so much as well for that. And everyone else participating. Amanda, thank you very much. And Mimi Goldman, thank you so much. Keep up the good work. I like your videos. Nothing is better than your lives. Thank you so much. I hopefully try and do as much as possible, really. But time limitations and priorities. But I love live streams, and primarily to open the space up for the community, really. And thank you for that. Initially, when you had more time, you can respond to individual comments too. But that's the purpose of the live streams, to people, of course, share their thoughts as well, participate, and also address anything. TMZBG, are there any updates on the decline of Israel's real economy? The Israeli economy is due to be degraded once more by Moody's, and that degrading will be killing their economy. Why? Because Israel is only one. Firstly, Israel, that's apart from the, I'll get to the other stuff in a sec. But when it comes to Moody's, it's the first time in history that they degraded them. That's number one. There were many things that happened for the first time, but the first time they were degraded by Moody's twice with a negative projection. For the first time in history, since Israel's establishment, they had to dig into the Bank of Israel reserves. That's only from the financial perspective. Other things, for the first time, for example, they tried to enforce conscription on the Orthodox community. But there are many other things. We'll just talk about economy here. Moody's, the main, really, credit rating agency, when it comes to investments in countries, they're one level above investment worthy now. Which means if they degrade them further, it will officially tell everyone in the world this country is not worthy of investing in. That's a catastrophe for Israel. And many companies already fled from Israel. Not foreign companies only, by the way, Israeli companies. A list of some of the biggest business owners, and some of them hold billions in assets in Israel, sent a letter to the government over half a year ago telling them, if you don't stop this now and reach an agreement, we are moving our assets abroad. And they did. They did. The finance minister is delusional. Bezalel Smotrich, he's delusional. After he got the credit rating degrading from Moody's, the only thing he was saying is that he criticized that they didn't label Hamas and HIZBULLAH as terrorist organizations in their statement. Is that a man who knows anything about economy, or is nothing? Psychopaths leading the country, and they will lead it to a further disaster. Uncertainty, no stability, a lack of foreign investment, internal investors leaving for good. when they were already facing a problem a year before, by the way, with the judicial reform. So the 7th of October came to even add more on their internal disaster. But again, they would cover all of that up. Why? To keep the whatever is remaining of the morale from a defeated nation. This is what they do. And let's go to the next question. Fatima saying Israeli bonds are backed by US taxpayer dollar, therefore whomever buys them cannot lose because US taxpayer will cover any losses. I'm not sure really about that. Thank you for noting that. But what I can say is it doesn't matter how much the US tries to back, by the way. Listen, at the end of the day, the people need to live. You know, the country is not only run by brutal force, right? The approach of the government in Israel now is what hasn't been achieved by force will be achieved with more force. That's not the way, you know, people would want to live their day-to-day lives. You know, at constant risk of being attacked, their country using them as cannon fodder, implementing the Hannibal Directive in mass on the people. And with regards to money, money isn't only the money that you know, the elite has in the country, and we already know that they're covered, the elite inside of Israel. However, the people need to have economic prosperity too, and the people need to have economic security. And if they don't have economic prosperity and security, apart from the general sense of security, then what is it? I mean, Israel sold the people the fantasy of being the safe haven for Jewish people, when in effect they were the worst place on earth for Jewish people. They were the grinding machine of them with what they're doing. It's the unsafest place. The least safe place for, you know, the Jewish people to live in. TMZ BGD, how many countries said that they would support Iran in a potential war? I think not many say that, but I think we have an indication of what might happen if Iran would go to an all-out war with Israel. They would be supported absolutely by all of the resistance fronts they support. In the past 14 months, there has been unprecedented coordination between the resistance fronts in the region. In the first phase of any all-out war between Iran and Israel, Russia and China would be on high alert, observing what Israel attacks inside of Iran and monitoring how Iran is performing against them. Iran is due to declare a strategic agreement with Russia that hasn't been declared yet. There's a very high likelihood that this would be a defense pact. If it proves to be a defense pact, that could explain the delay in their attack, knowing that something might escalate further, because Israel is already talking about now a counterstrike. Russia would undoubtedly be helping them during the process. China would be sitting, witnessing, and potentially helping when they need it, because China is like the massive superpower sitting there in the shadows, you know, pretending like they're not interested in all of these conflicts. And to be fair, they might actually not be, but they know what their enemies are like. I mean, they've been facing a country, an administration in the US constantly expanding globally. The world is a military base of the US, the whole world almost. And they had to answer. So they're on their way to enforce the multipolarity that is needed for the world alongside Russia. They will help because Iran supplies them with the majority of their oil. Iran even called China the most important partner in general. That's something important. However, other countries, I don't see. I mean, the Arab countries, unfortunately, are run by people who couldn't care less, shameful inaction towards Israel, even by statements. Some of them might have taken certain actions that were not declared, to be fair, that made some sort of an impact. But I don't think any of them will be like, oh yeah, we support Iran. No, as a matter of fact, they've been playing on the, tension side against Iran, right? And all of them should stop this by now. Iran and the West Asian region, all of them, you need to understand that, they have a common fate together. So they should coordinate more. And to be fair, there have been developments with that, like the agreement between Saudi Arabia and Iran in 2023 that was brokered by China and with the help of Oman. That was significant. Iran and Saudi Arabia need to have good ties. And ultimately, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Turkey need to have really good ties together. Because don't forget, these countries, all of them, it's not like they don't want to deal with the rest of the world or what have you, despite the fact that they have different tones when it comes to foreign policy, or with the Palestinian case, to what level, they support the Palestinian people. No, they are, but each of them had their own conditions and own historical pattern that dictated how they behave now, if that makes sense. And the primary aim of all of them is number one, survival. Number one, survival, and then increasing the power, right? So some people will claim even that, look at Egypt, for example, the biggest power with immediate borders next to Israel. They actually did not go on a war with Israel. And again, when I talk about stuff, people need to understand, all of you need to understand, it's not an endorsement of anything or anyone. I don't endorse any of the people who I'm talking about, but it's an observation. Some people argue that Egypt did not want to be dragged into a war where they could be opening every excuse under the sun, not only for Israel, but for other powers as well, to take over Egypt. And Israel still has ambitions in Sinai, and they still have ambitions in other countries too. Israel occupied Sinai for a long time. Israel claims to be a Jewish state. Where were the 10 Commandments revealed, right? In Sinai, weren't they? So, of course, we all know that it's all Jewish talk, and it's just, a front really to a neo-colonialist project. Fact of the matter is, each country is focusing on primarily surviving and not destroying itself. However, they know that, with increased power, they can potentially start to impose political will. And what we have seen in the past 15 months is how far the dynamics of the West Asian region have shifted. It's not the same anymore. It's not the same anymore. And even countries with historical ties to the United States, and although they still have, of course, ties with the United States and what have you, the US is losing its power slowly in the West Asian region. They're losing their, level of impact and effect, more scrutiny internally, like, why are we even there? Shouldn't these people be, in the US? Shouldn't be we spending that money on people in the US? And things are going there slowly. Things are going there slowly. I mean, unfortunately, though, many people they want everything like to happen immediately. All of a sudden, things don't happen like that. But I'm sure some countries will say, like, look, Iran has the right to defend itself. And some countries will be supporting Iran, and those will be primarily the countries who Iran supported or rely on Iran to. And Iran already had drills, by the way, don't forget, with Russia and with China. They're preparing. China had some of the biggest drills now as well. So some of them will be supporting. Some of them absolutely will be supporting. Sarah Carroll, what happened to Bibi's arrest warrant? It's sitting there on a desk. Ink on paper not being enforced. You see, the thing is about enforcement. If if no one's going to enforce it, then how many beautiful, wonderful UN resolutions we have? The UN Declaration of Universal Human Rights, the UN Declaration for the Palestinian people and their state, the UN Declaration about the Palestinian refugees, the UN Declaration supporting the Palestinian resistance. Wow. International laws, laws for warfare and laws for this and for that. So long as there's no enforcement, nothing would happen, I'm afraid. However, it's not to undermine the effectiveness of the arrest warrant. It's significant. And many countries, including in Europe, said that they will be complying with it. Because listen, if they're not going to be saying that they're going to comply with it, then Netanyahu wanted to visit Auschwitz the other day, again, playing on the victimhood card and the Holocaust. Poland told them, if you come here, we might arrest you. That's good. These things are good. And of course, everything is anti-Semites. It's important. But, with the enforcement side, that's the biggest problem. I think if there was enforcement already from the ICJ case, things would have been different. But you have the US administration. Listen, they're the biggest mafia on earth. They do whatever they want. If you don't listen, they'll kill you. TMZ BGD, are there any new statements made by Iran about the preparations of a true promise 3, and what could it be when the retaliation is coming? Listen, there have been declarations, and I spoke about each and every one of them as and when it came up. Okay? But I think the most relevant one was by one of the officials in Iran, saying that True Promise 3 is coming, and True Promise 3 is going to be significant. Of course, before they said it's going to be unprecedented, and. But I think the most, relevant one was, well, a key thing about True Promise 3 is not really giving too much information and potentially creating this false sense of security when it comes to Israel. One of the main reasons that True Promise 2 was so successful is the fact that it was a shock attack from Iran. The US told Israel, we're witnessing through our satellite imagery suspicious movements from Iran, and within less than hours even, Israel said, oh yeah, we're expecting something. All of a sudden, bang, 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 no defense, no nothing. So a key thing is to, of course, not reveal, not to show too many signs, but also reassure, everyone that it's still there, it's still coming. Okay, I'll take the last one from Jimmy. What is happening in Rafah? Like everything went silent. Is it a ghost town or is there fighting still? Well, I think the spotlight went to the north slightly simply because they're suffering more. But the fact of the matter is all of the Gazan population is suffering, including in the south. Now, there are areas that no one should really reach in Rafah. You know, there are certain zones where Israel would shoot everything moving. But Rafah has come on the headlines again now because of the details when it comes to the ceasefire, where it was reported that Israel would be withdrawing gradually from the Philadelphia corridor and the Rafah crossing for Egypt to reactivate it again. Nothing is as intense as what's happening in the north, but the central camps and the south, they are still facing trouble. And we'll wrap it up there, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in for another show. Thank you for everyone who joined the chat and sent comments. Of course, apologies if we didn't reach all of them just for the limited time, really. But thank you very much for your participation. Everyone who sent supers, thank you so much. Mimi Goldman, AA Team, Tariq Mujahid, Amin Danya, Trill Iman, Wasim Gurani, and Alan Marwin. We'll hopefully have a segment after this. Perhaps another live stream or two over the weekend. We'll see how things go, probably at an earlier time. Apart from that, that's it for tonight. So enjoy the rest of your weekend. Stay blessed, and I'll see you soon in the next video. Peace, everyone. Take care.